If someone would have told me that I was going to be divorced or processing a divorce at age 34, I would have literally fallen into a coma. Hey, Maddie. I am recording this podcast episode in the Airbnb that I am in Tijuana in the north of Mexico. I'm here for a week. And today I really felt called to record an episode around my very strong opinion that I don't believe that if you decide to get married and then you decide to separate or get divorced, that that means that your marriage has failed. And I really want to break down to you how I truly believe that this is societal conditioning and it's something that I don't think that we need to believe. And I want to share with you what I think about this whole topic. So, as you may or may not know, I recently got separated. And one of the things that has really been annoying me throughout this whole process has been just how much people have been projecting their own experiences, their own insecurities, their own fears, and their own conditioning of the whole concept of separation and divorce. And one of the things that I want to talk about today is this concept that if you get married to someone and then you decide to separate and divorce, that now this means that your marriage has failed and that you've done something wrong and that you've failed at achieving some sort of a milestone. I really don't believe in this. And I think one of the sources of this is the pressure that when you get married, now you're supposed to vow that you're going to be with the person forever. And so I'm not saying that you should get married, knowing that you're maybe not going to be the person with that person forever. Obviously, when I got married, I thought that I was going to be married until I die. And I thought this was going to be my person that I was going to grow old with and have a family and all that kind of stuff. Of course, we want to go into the marriage in a very positive, committed way. But if on the off chance things change and you decide that this is not someone that you want to be with forever, this is not the marriage you're meant to be in forever, I don't believe that we should be treated as failures because of this. And one of the core reasons for this is people change, things change, and people grow apart, and that's normal. It's normal for people to evolve. And I actually think that sometimes separating and divorcing is a sign that you are being honest with yourself around the fact that you have changed, that maybe this relationship is something that is just no longer serving you. In my personal experience, it wasn't like I got separated because we hated each other, because things were really unbearable and all these things. We had a very beautiful relationship right until the end. In fact, we are still on very good terms. We are still very loving towards each other. We're supporting each other through this process. It's been a very amicable, collaborative process. I wish him nothing the best. Same with me. Sorry, same with him with me. And it doesn't have to be this really negative experience. And so, especially with that, I think that it's a really great thing. And it shows that someone is able to really be objective around the situation by deciding to get separated or divorced. And there are so many things societally that I think tell us that divorce is bad, being separated is bad. And the reason I know this is because before I got separated, I used to really judge people who got divorced. I used to think that that was something where, they failed. They did not uphold their promise. They didn't select the person that they married very well. But now that I've been in that situation, I see things completely differently, obviously, because I truly believe that I picked an incredible person to be married to, and I have zero regrets. It just happens to be that we grew apart, we have different goals, and we have decided to separate. And so, through that lens, I really want to share with you that, I don't regret my marriage at all. I think I had an absolutely incredible marriage. I was married for 3 years. I was with my partner for 5 years. We went through some incredibly difficult things together. In fact, my ex husband had cancer for 2 years, and I supported him through that. It was a really beautiful experience. We both grew a lot. And again, it's not like we're separating because we hate each other. Our relationship has just run its course. And so now that I've had that experience, it's really shed light onto the fact that, you know, as we evolve as humans, we don't know what's going to happen. We make decisions to the best of our abilities. We make decisions from as optimistic of a point as possible. We, make decisions from a place of commitment. But if things change in life, which life has just so many, twists and turns, if things change, I don't believe that we should be penalized for deciding that maybe we want something different. I actually think that's something to be celebrated because it shows that we're willing to be honest with ourselves. I truly believe that a lot of people, and I saw this across the board when I was married, when I was single, now that I'm separated, I truly believe that there are so many people who are in relationships, but they're actually unhappy. And I know this because a lot of my girlfriends will tell me about how they feel about their husbands, what frustrates them. And it kind of sounds to me like a lot of people are trapped. And so I really want to flip this whole thing on the head and say that I don't actually think that ending a marriage is failure. I personally think a bigger failure is staying in a relationship, whether it's a marriage or whether it's a relationship. I think actually staying in that situation when it doesn't serve you is the ultimate failure because you are failing yourself. And society is not structured in a way for us to believe that because again there is so much stigma attached to divorce. You always hear like, oh, 50% of marriages end in divorce, and oh, they got divorced and they argued over all these things, and then you have all these stories of women who cried for a year and a half after their divorce. And even one of the biggest things, this thing literally gets me riled up, and it didn't used to get me riled up until I got married and am now about to start processing a divorce, is the fact that when you are single before you're married, you're single, right? And you get to say you're single when you fill out your tax applications. You say that you're single. Any kind of official documentation, you are classified as single. When you get separated or divorced, you never return to being single. You are now basically stamped by society as someone who is either separated or divorced. Society will not let you go back to being single. It literally wants to classify you almost like as that failure. And that is, I think, the ultimate evidence that we are conditioned to believe that if you separate or divorce, that now your marriage has failed and you've done something wrong. And again, like I said before, I don't believe I did anything wrong. I loved my ex-husband. I still love my ex-husband. He's absolutely incredible. We had a beautiful relationship. We dated for 3 years, then 2 years, and then we got married. We had an absolutely incredible marriage. We went into the marriage fully committed. I literally, even in my vows, I did vow to be with him forever. And I'm not afraid to admit that at that time I truly believed that. Otherwise, why the hell would I have married him, right? We had an incredible marriage. We went through, like I said, a very difficult time with his health for 2 years. I supported him very, very fully. We really grew together during that experience. And then in the end, we decided to separate. And just because our minds were changed and again we grew separately does not mean that all that time we spent together and all those decisions we made together to be together were false, right? And so I really don't believe that there was anything that I did wrong, anything that I failed. I think it's actually the opposite because I truly believe that deciding to separate or divorce, especially with all this societal conditioning, is really the ultimate act of self-love. And not just even self-love, but love for the other person. I think that the most detrimental thing that you can do to yourself or someone else is to continue being with someone when you don't anymore feel 1,000% committed or like the relationship is something that you should be in. I think that is the ultimate, again, self-abandonment and also an act of, fear. And, no one wants to be with someone who is not 1,000% committed to being with them, right? And 1,000% convinced that they are the person that they're meant to continue spending their life with. And so I really want to, again, just shift the narrative here for a lot of us, whether it's women, men, everyone on this earth, around this concept of a marriage failing. And really, the way to flip this is to start changing the conversations that we're having. So, a lot of the time, when I tell people that I've separated or divorced, or sorry, separated, a lot of people are like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I'm so," and of course it's polite to say sorry, but it's not until I explain to them, "Hey, I really appreciate it." And they're, but they're all just like, "Oh, like, are you okay? That must be so terrible, like blah blah blah." But I'm like, that's all again us projecting our societal conditioning onto each other. Because of course people have to assume that it's this terrible thing and that we hate each other and that now I'm going to be depressed for a year and that there's this just awful, awful things that has happened. Yes, it's not comfortable. Of course, there's a lot of pain and grief that comes with any separation or divorce, even if it's amicable, even if it's the right thing for you. I've still, of course, and I'm continuing to process a lot of grief around it, but there have been very few people who have actually congratulated me on that. I went for brunch with a girlfriend in Tulum who I met. She's actually divorced too, and that's probably why she understands. But when I told her I'm recently separated, she said, I hope it's okay for me to say congratulations because I know how difficult that is. And I know that you're likely doing something that is going to, serve you. And that was really refreshing. But I think until you've been through a separation or a divorce, it's really hard to have that perspective. And I know that because that's my experience. Before I went through this whole thing, I thought that, divorce and separation is so awful, right? And so I think the way that we need to flip this narrative is to not just immediately fall into the habit of now assuming that, oh, you got separated and divorced. Oh, what a terrible thing. It must be so painful. Like, oh, you must feel so terrible. And it's like, no, there's actually some good things that come out of it too. So I think the way that we talk to each other about this experience is either going to strengthen the societal conditioning that has a grip on us, or is going to free us from this conditioning and allow us to actually believe what we truly believe, which is different from what society wants us to believe, right? And so I think, going through this experience, I don't feel like a failure, and I really refuse to identify with that. And it's been really interesting to just really rewrite this narrative. And one of the things that has kind of brought me a lot of joy is to really shift people's perspectives. Because I know for myself, if someone would have told me that I was going to be divorced or processing a divorce at age 34, I would have literally fallen into a coma. That was my worst fear, to be single again, or pardon me, separated or divorced at 34. Do you see what I mean? It's like you're not even supposed to say single. Now you have to say separated or divorced. For someone to tell me that, that was my worst fear. It was my worst fear. But now having gone through it, I see that like it's actually such a beautiful opportunity for me to start a new chapter in my life. I think it's so incredible that I got to share such a sacred few years with someone who I deeply, deeply trusted, deeply loved, deeply respected, and still respect and admire. I got to really go all in with someone. And now I get to open a new chapter of my life, right? And as I'm saying this, I know that a lot of people are going to get triggered. They're going to be like, oh, but how dare you start a new chapter? But no, like you failed in that marriage and, you threw away that and now you think you can restart. And it's like, yeah, I can fucking restart. Like I can do whatever I want. We're allowed to have multiple lives and multiple experiences in our life. And so I think it's just very, very beautiful. And the other thing that I really want to touch on here is, again, something that has been really something that I've really loved about this process has been seeing how people have shifted their perspective around this whole topic after hearing me talk about it. So, even just little things like people saying that, oh, like when they say like, oh my gosh, like, are you okay? Like, is everything good? And when I say like, you know what, obviously I'm processing a lot of grief, but like, I feel happy. Like, this is an aligned decision. I don't feel tortured. I don't feel any doubt. It feels like a very clean situation for me. And it's been really great to be able to, again, shift people's perspectives around this topic because I do think that it's so stigmatized, right? When you hear about separation or divorce, you just assume that there's massive arguments, there's fights over assets, and there's massive, really painful painful, ugly breakups, but it's been honestly an honor for me to kind of reframe that narrative for people and show them like, hey, it's actually possible to do it in a way that doesn't, to almost like do it with dignity, do it with respect. Even little things like when we separated, I was in Mexico and I went back to Spain to get all my things and just kind of slowly gather all my things because I decided to move to Mexico. And I actually spent a week living with my ex-husband back in our apartment. And it was honestly the most beautiful experience. We went for coffee together. We talked, we planned our separation, which sounds really weird, but everything was just really calm and we really just enjoyed each other's company. And in fact, we still talk every few weeks. Obviously, there's still a lot of logistics that we need to take care of, but we're just having we're doing this in our own way. And that's something that we said as soon as we separated. We said, hey, like, we're not going to fall into all these societal things of like, we have to hate each other. We can't talk to each other. We have to argue over assets. Like, no, no, no. We always did things our way. And so that's how we're going to do it again. Even when we got married, I don't believe in engagements. I don't believe in big weddings. I don't believe in all this fancy stuff like big diamond rings. Like we did everything ourselves in our own way. We got married on a beach at 10 a.m. on a Saturday and just like didn't have an engagement. We bought the ring together. Like we did everything just completely differently. And so we decided we're going to do our separation or our divorce differently, which means that we are going to still talk to each other. We are going to, spend that week together if we want. And it's been a really beautiful way to kind of just like end this chapter of our life. Not to say that it hasn't been painful, not to say that, again, there is heartbreak, there is grief, and we are mourning a future that we thought we were going to have together. Like, I'm not saying that is not part of it. It's not just all puppies and rainbows, but it doesn't have to be this like really, really horrible, like supercharged, like really traumatizing experience. We can do it with respect and dignity. And so it's been really healing actually to not just, rewrite our own narrative, but also kind of like show other people what's possible. Because the thing that really kills me is I know that there are a lot of women and perhaps men, but I'm kind of mainly speaking to women here. There are a lot of women out there who are trapped in their relationship, in their marriage, and they don't think they can leave. They don't think that they can end the relationship because they feel guilty. They feel like they're going to be, judged. They feel like it's going to be really, really painful and it's going to be this awful thing. And they think that staying is easier. And so I'm in no way advocating that everyone should leave their marriage. Like, I'm not trying to break people up. If you love your relationship, obviously I want you to stay in it. But if you feel like you are not happy in your marriage, you're not happy in your relationship, and you want something more, or you feel like it's run its course and it's time for the next chapter, I really want to share with you that that is possible. You are allowed to ask for that, and you get to decide how this process is going to go for you. It doesn't have to be the typical freaking movie scenario of a nightmare with lawyers and expensive trials and arguing over assets and all that kind of stuff. Small caveat here, we did not have children together, so I fully recognize that when you have children together, there are added complications, there are added logistics. I completely, totally understand that. I cannot speak to that because I did not have children. So obviously that simplified things. We did have joint assets together, some very large assets, but we managed to split them up in a very, very logical and very, respectful way. I'm very happy with how we split things up. And so I really want this to be also a message to women out there who feel like they don't have a choice. They feel guilty even thinking about that, or they're worried that it's going to be this really, really stressful, awful thing. It doesn't have to be. And a big thing that I think is a factor is if you have married a good person, if you are with someone who, like, I'm not talking about abusive relationships here, or being married to a narcissist or someone with addiction problems or something like that. That was not my experience. I was married to a very, very incredible person, very stable, very smart, very loving, very respectful, like just really great person. If you're with someone who's like that, it doesn't have to be a disaster if both of you decide to separate, right? you can still process the separation and the divorce in an amicable way and have it be a very empowering, beautiful experience. Again, you can actually close that chapter in a way that isn't just a bunch of screaming matches and really, really terrible pain, right? So I want to just really empower you to do what's right by you. And if you need to separate or divorce, that can be the most beautiful act of self-love, and also, like I said, an act of love towards the other person, because I know myself, there's nothing worse than someone staying with me because they don't want to be with me, or even if they don't want to be with me and they just think it's a safer option, right? The worst thing you can do in your life is play it safe because you're scared. And through this experience, I've really learned that we do really have choices around how we manage situations. And so I really wanted to share with you this entire kind of thought process that I've had around, marriages failing, because I've been hearing this a lot lately where it's, oh, like, the marriage failed, oh, their marriage failed, they separated and divorced. It's like, no, 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 like, my marriage did not fail. Make no mistake, like, my marriage was freaking strong. Like, we literally got through stage 4 cancer together. Like, my ex-husband almost died. There were times where I was literally told that he was not going to make it, yet we managed to continue supporting each other. We never ever had any kind of dramatic situations during the cancer. We went through it so like literally side by side. We supported each other. I gave him exactly what he needed. He is eternally grateful to how I supported him. I'm grateful for how he supported me during him having cancer. He literally helped me build my entire business while he was fighting stage 4 cancer. That is not a failure. That is not a failure. I got to travel to Tunisia and meet his entire family and see the tip of Africa. He got to travel to Croatia. We got to move to Spain together this year. We both managed to leave Canada together. There were so many beautiful things that happened in our marriage. And for someone to say, or for society to tell me that, oh, your marriage failed because you weren't together forever, like, you literally could not predict, 5 years ago that you were going to literally die together. Like, I refuse to believe that that's a failure. Like, nobody can predict their life that much. And that's why 50% of marriages end in divorce, because it's not realistic for us to commit for the next, like, 50 to 60 years. And again, I'm not saying that you should get in a marriage even if you're kind of like, I'm not sure. Like I said, when we were getting married, we were both 1,000% sure that we were going to be together forever. Like, you need to go into the marriage fully committed. There's no other way than to do that. But if in the end it turns out that, you realize that there were different things that you wanted, your life took you in different directions, things happened that maybe put a bit of a strain on the relationship and you weren't able to patch things together, like, I don't think that we should be crucified for that. I don't think that we should be stigmatized for that. And I certainly don't think that we should now be forced to forever say we're separated, divorced, because we did that. Like, it's almost like the stamp of divorce has this, like, element of failure in it. It's like, oh, you told someone you were going to be with them forever, but then you didn't end up being with them forever for the next 50, 60 years. So you're a failure. So now we're going to mark you as divorced. And you're never going to be able to live that down. Now you're going to have to tell every single fucking person that you meet that you are fucking divorced. Like, I don't think that's very fair. And I don't think it's fair either, because a lot of people these days are not actually getting married, right? They're deciding to just be common law. And so if you decide to not actually follow the constitution of marriage of society and you decide to just be together and then you break up, you don't get the label of divorce. But it's only once you stamp yourself with the societal structure that now you're going to be basically, shamed for not following through on this thing over the next 50, 60 years. I don't think that's fucking fair. So the other kind of, and the thing that this makes me kind of think of is, I think that's bullshit. I think it's a bullshit societal construction. And so now it makes me think that, like, I don't know, maybe I don't want to get married again because I don't want to participate in this constitution that basically shames people for acts of self-love. It shames people for being honest with what they want. And it actually also shames people for growing. A lot of the reason people get separated and divorced is because people change, people transform, things change in their life. They start to think differently. They start to see each other differently. And sometimes that is a beautiful thing. I have transformed so much in my marriage. It's actually crazy. Like, even my ex-husband told me, he's like, I think you had the bigger transformation in our marriage. And like, that's a beautiful thing. I think the most sad thing on earth is if you don't change. And I'm not saying that people who stay together forever didn't change. Like, there's a lot of people who they change and they transform and they grow together. But sometimes, sorry, there's someone like in my Airbnb, there's windows and they're kind of, you can slightly see the people outside. They can't see inside, but it's always a little creepy. But like, a lot of people stay in their marriage, and they transform within, and they mold to each other, and that's beautiful. We love that. We love when you can support each other through all the stages of growth in your life. But sometimes people grow and they change and they don't necessarily fit perfectly together anymore. And for us to now shame people for saying like, hey, I've kind of changed out of the mold that we were in, and I don't know that this really fits the most. I'm not really 1,000% sure this is, the best thing for us to continue staying together for the betterment of our growth. Hey, like, I think we should separate. I don't think that's failure. I don't think that's a bad thing. That's just a sign of like, hey, you're being honest about how much you've changed, and you're actually doing something that is really respectful towards the other person, and say, hey, like, I don't think this is the best for both of us. Because if it's not the best thing ever for one person, it's not the best thing ever for the other person either. And sometimes it's hard for people to understand that, especially through a separation, where you think like, oh, this person broke up with this person, or they separated from this person, and now the other person got screwed over. It's like, no, 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 I don't believe that. If one person is not 1,000% convinced that this is the direction that they need to continue going in their life, it is actually a disservice for them to stay in the relationship on behalf of the other person. Because again, no one wants to be with someone who is not 1,000% sure that this is exactly what they need to be in their life, right? So I want you to really like think about, this is one piece of societal conditioning that is placed upon us that is so hard to break out of. But there are so many other ways that society has a chokehold on the way that we think, on the way that we live our life, on the way that we love ourselves, and the way that we see ourselves, and the way that we allow others to see ourselves. And so I want you to really think about like, where else does society have a chokehold on you and is forcing you to see a certain way, for example, or see yourself in a certain way, for example, being a failure because you got separated or divorced. And I want you to really let go of that conditioning, because I found that when you do that, that is when you really feel so free, because you don't have the shackles of society just kind of like holding you down. I hope you loved this episode. I'm going to be talking more about things like this on my podcast, on my YouTube channel. And so I hope that you enjoyed it. Let me know if this resonated with you. Send me a message on Instagram. I'd love to hear from you. And I will see you in the next one, baddie.